Hello, everyone, and happy New Year. Welcome to Erudite's Shockwave Talks. I'm Janine Ramirez. I work for Erudite to empower organizations with people analytics and insights without the employee surveys. So at Erudite, we love learning, and this webinar series called Shockwave Talks is our way of learning from experts and sharing all the insights with all of you. So thank you very much for joining us today to learn about how we can unlock HR's potential in 2023 from not one, not two, but three resource speakers today. They're all from the tech industry. Okay, before I introduce our guests, I just want to quickly go over some reminders so that we get it over with. One, time is precious, so we'll keep everything within an hour. Two, please make sure to use the chat and ask questions and share your insights and thoughts anytime throughout the webinar. If we have extra time, I'm going to read them out for you so that we can get answers for them. Third, the more the merrier. So right now, share this event and invite colleagues to join us and start the conversation. And lastly, this is being recorded and we'll be sending you guys the link to the video after the event. Again, please feel free to share the event right now. Okay, let's get to it. Time to welcome our guests and unlock HR secrets for 2023. We have three tech-tastic resource speakers today that we're so excited to learn from. First, we have Senior People Analytics Manager from Google, Tunji Oki. Welcome, Tunji. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for
How are
having
you
me.
today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you. So I'll just do a quick intro. My name is Tunji. I've been at Google for the last 6 years, working currently as a senior people analytics manager, specifically over equity research we do to our people processes. So I have my PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and I've done a lot of consulting just in various HR formats. And so really excited to join this panel today.
And we're excited to have you today. And next, we also have Stacey Milton with over 15 years of experience in talent operations for tech companies like Meta and Accenture. It's an honor to have you here with us, Stacey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am so excited about being a part of this platform and learning from others and hopefully giving a lot of my opinions to this group. As you mentioned, I have well over 15 years of experience in talent acquisition and talent operations. I'm a bit of a unicorn because I spent early of my career in accounting and finance. So
Wow.
spent a lot of time doing many different things that's culminated to a lot of good work, I must say. So thanks for having me.
And thanks for being here. We're excited to hear your perspective on challenges and all the questions that I'm going to be asking because I'm super curious. Okay, last but definitely not the least, a game designer turned head of people and operations in Silicon Valley, Fábio Frizas. Thank you for joining us, Fábio.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me, and I'm humbled to be part of such events and with amazing guests as Tunji and Stacey. As Janine mentioned, I actually came from a technical background. I used to be a game designer and a product manager for an online game. I turned it to people, and right now I'm doing 8 years so far. I have been doing recruitment, people operations in general, and right now I used to be head of people and operations at a Silicon Valley company, doing mostly software, and there I did recruiting and people operations in general. So I'm excited to give my more out of the box perspective here and talk to you guys about the secrets of HR.
We love that we have a gamer on board. So we're excited to hear what you have to say today. Okay, we can't thank you guys enough for lending us your time and sharing your experience with us. We have three interesting perspectives today to help us unlock the potential of HR in 2023. So let's get to it. It's a new year. The question is, does the new year bring new challenges, or will we be seeing more of the same issues from 2022, like the great resignation, the shift to remote or hybrid work? This is a question for all three of you. What would be the biggest challenge for your team or HR in general that they'll be facing this year when it comes to managing the workforce, and how do you think they should prepare for it? So let's start with Tunji. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of mixed, right? In terms of, are we going to see the same from 2022? I think we're going to see some of the things are the same. We're going to see some new things in 2023. 2022 really was the year of kind of remote work flexibility based on everything we saw with the pandemic. But I think 2023 is going to be a really defining year for the future of work. And if these like remote/hybrid practices are actually here to stay. Last time we were kind of forced into the situation due to a pandemic. Companies established guidelines on how they're moving forward. But now, as you see today, there are some companies who are dialing it back in and wanting folks to come back into the office. There are some companies that are sticking to their remote policies and using that as like a somewhat of a competitive advantage. And so I think that's an area that's going to be a real focus. Employees and prospective candidates are really going to be seeking like, where does a company stand on remote/hybrid work? And then I would also say another area that's going to be a kind of a big area is just kind of with the layoffs, right? Everything that we've seen with, in the tech industry, especially in 2022, job security. Whereas in tech, we don't usually, it's not as much of a concern in tech with job security. Usually there's like compared to other industries. But I think now with everything that's going on, like HR is going to have a really strong input to really reassure folks and that well-being, that mental health, all the aspects that come with not being certain about your job. Like, I think we're going to need to double and triple down in those areas.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because it's like we have the issues and we still haven't quite resolved them. And we're coming into a new year and we're, it's feeding into that as well. What do you think, Stacey? What do you think the greatest challenge will be this year?
Yeah, and probably from my vantage point, I certainly believe that the layoffs and how that's affected our talent organizations. We've seen our big tech companies in the past several years do a great bit of hiring, really lean into diversity. And so this is an effort in 2023 that companies are taking to be more prescriptive about right sizing the organizations. However, I will take a twist on this and say that I would love to see our companies that are contemplating or that are even engaging right now in layoffs to really or shift the mindset and the work behind this more into how do we productively bring this and shift these resources either into other places and spaces within our organizations, or start to look at more internal shifts rather than internships for the talent that we currently have. So hopefully that will maybe sort of shift the narrative, if you will, in the coming year.
Right. I think we're gonna hear more about this in the next part of the webinar, but I want to know what Fábio has to say. What's your observation? Is it similar to Tunji's and Stacey's?
Yeah, I think so far we are on very similar grounds. There are three main points of concern and attention on my side. Those will be remote work, layoffs, and actually one that may be newer is the rise of AI. So on remote, since 2017, I used to hear about companies going remote first, going distributed. But as Tunji said, there are a lot of companies that actually had a forced hand into going remote. So right now it's time going out of the lockdown that people are maybe reassessing if they actually need to go remote, if they actually want to see this as a competitive advantage or was something that they had to do. So this may be seen as a downside from a candidate's perspective, but I actually see as a good opportunity to trim off companies that actually want to go remote, that actually want to be remote first, or others that just see this as something that they had to do beforehand. On layoffs, I think that's very adjacent to the VC perspective and the end of the blitzscaling era. So it's a time of adjusting workforce into the actual needs instead of having surpluses that actually they repurpose later. And as Stacey mentioned, I think that one of the best perspectives that I have seen so far are companies that want to readdress people that they are not seeing as much a need right now in their workforce doing, let's say, sales, marketing, or even recruiting, that they can shift and transfer this knowledge into other areas. Into AI, I think that's the big novelty right now with the rise of GPT chats. That's something that actually rose a little early, but right now come to the attention of everyone. And I think many jobs are going into this, also reassessing is, for example, ghostwriters or marketing professionals or salespeople doing just outbound sales. Is the core thing that I'm doing replaceable, or is it something more specialized that I can refine? Is the AI going to help me out be a better output of my previous results, or is it something that will be competing with me? So I think those are the three main points that I'm assessing right now.
Awesome. Like I'm glad you brought up AI, and I want to touch on that like later on. But I completely agree. Like my job is basically writing, and now I'm using AI to help me out with writing. So that's something that we can discuss later. Just a quick roundup on what you guys think of going remote like first, and flexibility. Are you pro remote or pro, I don't know, pro in office? For the three of you, Fábio,
Yeah,
I won't
I'm
presume,
even
but
kind of cautious right now to just say remote, since many companies are talking about this or using hybrid, but they are actually enforcing in-office work. I'm actually very biased through distributed workforce. So I think that once we can tap into an international market and we can enable people that have just like digital jobs, like instead of people that are
right.
doing manufacturing, for example, I think we should go as much remote as possible. But again, I prefer to have this as an innovative edge and competitive advantage into companies instead of a requirement into recruitment.
Okay, interesting. Stacey?
Yeah, I'll make it simple. I'd love to see organizations give the choice.
Right. That's what we want. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
exactly.
saying a lot of people are like pro flexibility, but it's up to you, right? Like it's great to have a choice. And
Yeah,
Tunji?
I feel like I was just
Oh,
going to say,
sorry.
I feel like just like we all learn differently, I think we all work differently and can
Right.
show our productivity in different environments.
Yeah. Awesome. Completely agree. Tunji,
Yeah,
same
I
lines?
think plus one of what Stacey mentioned, just the flexibility, right? Empowering the employee to choose what works best for their situation. Sometimes you think the desire to be remote may just have to do with like not wanting to commute, but it's such a layered, aspect of the real reasons why people want to be remote that it's kind of, the more flexibility we could offer, the better we'll do for our employees.
Awesome. Great. So now we know where everyone stands. You guys mentioned the issues and the challenges of this year. It's a bit like sensitive, like there's a rise in inflation. People are talking about a recession. Employees are still quitting. And unfortunately, we're also seeing like massive layoffs in the tech sector. So a question for Stacey, how have these factors impacted the talent landscape for tech companies, and how do you think organizations should adjust their talent sourcing and recruitment strategies?
Yeah, I alluded to it a moment ago, just in terms of we're in the air quotes quiet era, quiet quitting, quiet hiring, which
Right.
is really a cover up for doing more with less. Um, I think we're in a recession. I'm not an economist. I think that there are waves of recession that shows up at various times. We had record spending during the Christmas holidays, and all of the events and holidays that happen in the month of December. We've shown record hiring. Our unemployment rate is 3.5%, down a couple of percentage points from November, even with the layoffs, even with quiet quitting, even with, all of these factors. So I do believe that organizations will probably look to change their talent model a bit.
Okay.
And, I talked a moment ago about internal ships, really
Right.
moving people around into areas where their skills translate into other areas. For instance, I've been in talent operations. My experience is really sort of organizational effectiveness. Where does that lean into an organization that may not be aligned to talent? So, really changing our framework and our narrative during this time is going to be extremely important. The other side of that is, I think that because there's this just platform of uncertainty, that companies will need to push towards more staff augmentation rather than moving into more of this full-time operational type model within the quiet hiring standpoint. I think that there is the opportunity to build from that, to take that position of, if we are going to move around resources and do more with less, how do we play the game of chess here with the human capital that we have?
Right. It's funny that we have quiet hiring now, right? Like there was quiet quitting, quiet firing, and now there's quiet hiring. But I guess like just really means, I don't know, creating internal career paths or like internal career growth for employees as well, right?
I think
Um,
here's an opportunity for us to build out maybe a redeployment
mhm,
sub
right,
organization. How do we redeploy these skills? Not
right,
necessarily leave it up to the manager or the person, but really take more of an in depth participatory kind of framework in, who do we have on the bench and where can we move them?
right. Be more strategic about it and get
Exactly.
feedback as well, right? From the
Yeah.
employees. You mentioned uncertainty, and I'm curious to know the thoughts of Tunji. Like how for Tunji, how will the uncertainty affect the mindset of employees in the tech sector, you think? So, and I think we have a question or a mention about like managers, like the struggles of managers. So what should managers keep in mind as they endeavor to retain their top talent in light of the layoffs and all the uncertainty?
Yeah, right. So I think there's going to be a few kind of areas that's going to be impacted by the uncertainty. I think I was alluding to one earlier about like just like the job security of just the, employees not feeling as confident about the, the trajectory of the company or so, just maybe as they used to feel before. But I think now something that you'll also see is employees being a lot more, or even candidates being a lot more forecasting which roles they take within a company. Before it was mostly aligned to like skills, interest, and backgrounds. But now, like, we see certain pockets that are being disproportionately affected by these layoffs, right? And so now it's kind of like you're seeing like sometimes newer business units that like maybe haven't been established yet. We're seeing, sometimes in recruiting orgs, we're seeing sometimes, in other parts of the business. And so now I think, the new mindset from employees are going to want to try to be in the safer areas, right? The areas that may be more resistant to if there is another economic downturn or if there is another change. And I think, what the manager can do, I think, Stacey was alluding to some of it as well, but just really, sharpening skills, right? Like let it be a continually ongoing conversation where, you're looking for opportunities for your direct report to grow their skills, to grow their capabilities, and then that wide application of like, this is all the things that you can do with this skill set, because it's very varied, right? And so like kind of connecting those dots, but then also being that kind of that sort the sense of calm, like in this environment, there's many different perspectives in terms of, if you hear something, should you share it with your direct report or should you hold off until the full story is coming out? There's kind of two like differing opinions. I'm always on their side of transparency. Like, even if it's like, hey, I don't know if this is going to be what happens, but just in this area where, people are, life impacting decisions of like layoffs are being happening right now, as a manager, if you can even give them 1 extra week or 2 extra weeks of just like heads up that this may be happening, I think then they would, be able to have more of the resources and the kind of emotional capabilities to kind of like handle it and maybe even be able to pivot to something else before they get laid off.
Right. We had a previous Shockwave talk on building a culture of trust. And that was like one of the topics, is that, being transparent and trusting your employees with information, especially if it's going to be kind of life-changing, right? Okay, I want to ask the similar question to Fábio as well. So how do you think the recent US recession and tech sector layoffs affect the mindset of managers and employees in the tech sector? And what should they keep in mind as they endeavor to retain talent in each organization?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question because it entices the different perspectives into both sides. On management side, I think that's very similar to a term we usually use in the financial markets, like the great versus fear. So in a recession, it's time to play safe. Maybe you have to innovate and build less and think more about ROI, business and data. So managers should be having a stronger belt of doing stakeholder management and try to justify each endeavor that they want to do. On the candidate side, it's also something kind of strange and requires some adaptation because, as Stacey mentioned, there's probably going to be a rise in third-party teams, in temporary staffs. People should maybe be doing more entrepreneurial work. They should be doing more consulting, especially since many people should be affected by layoffs. So it's one of the ways to keep the engines running. I think candidates and recruiters will both feel more comfortable into talking with people like with shorter tenures into companies and doing more small gigs into different companies. And probably the term that should stay is still trust, transparency, and communication. Because for both sides and both parties, once you guys have like smaller friction and you can just work without all this more political concerns, is to the other side, trust me, is the work that I'm doing is being seen. Once we clear there with this, we can actually focus on getting results, and the conversation will probably be shifting to a more result-oriented one.
We have a question from Rex in the chat, and I'd like to ask like Fábio as head of people, because he's asking, does that pose a legal issue, like being open about like possible layoffs in the company? As head of people, like how would you answer that question?
Actually, yeah, I think that's also something that I didn't mention earlier, but one of the topics that may come to mind is to founders to be either open into a more external way about the layoffs that they have been doing, but also to think about on the long term, what is the ripple effects that you may have, like a founder just laying off thousands of people in a day, and right in the next month when they get a scale, they are hiring again. What is the message that this is posing? On a legal standpoint, that's probably not my expertise here, but I think that people should be conscious if they want to just be outspoken about everything. And in the terms of more job security and providing everything that an employee may need, I think this even has to come over back to the investment side, because you may be paying people off to go outside of the company, and you have really high cost to hire them, or you may have any labor issues in the way that you've been lay off people. So I think this is a concern, and right now a clear topic from founders to be talking about.
All right, thanks for the question, Rex. And yeah, like I think it would also depend on the company, and they do have to discuss it with legal as to how to best communicate it in a legal way, but also one that's sensitive and transparent for for the employees. Okay, like we have another LinkedIn user that mentions challenges for HR, emerging technologies. So I want to jump into tech. So we've established the challenges. On the other hand, we're seeing like leaps in the field of technology and AI. Like we're seeing, I don't know, news of Microsoft's plans to invest in OpenAI and ChatGPT, for example. So there's a lot of excitement as well when it comes to tech, right? So maybe we can start with Fábio again, our game designer. What role do you see HR technology playing in addressing these HR challenges, and how do you envision HR professionals using tech to drive better outcomes for the organization?
Yeah, I must say I'm one of the ones that maybe dream of the day that AI is gonna be helping us to augment the work that we have been doing. So it's not so much as a threat, but how can we just use this like an extra arm into everything, as Janine said, into copywriting, for example. So into HR, there are a lot of HR techs that are on the rise. Even before we were talking about AI, I think people should be using AI into their PRs, but right now it's a more tactile feel. So, for example, we have into recruitment a broad range of solutions into how to write job descriptions, how to enhance them, how to evaluate if you are being any kind of different into your employee value proposition. We have gifting systems, we have ATSs, HR ops software to even like host meetings or everything that we can do into the HR and HR ops side. I think that's a big plus into making teams more effective. And this is probably enabling more and more people to start thinking about people first, because I'm one of the few that thinks, for example, into the starting founders of a company, we should have someone really thinking about people or even with people expertise. And right now, enabling this kind of more linear ops to go from zero to hero, it's amazing, and I'm actually looking forward a lot into what HR tech can do into our field.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to talk about that insight that you had a little bit later about, having someone really just focused on developing people. But I have a question for Stacey when it comes to HR tech. Like, what are the ways in which technology has revolutionized the recruitment process in particular, in your opinion and in your experience?
Yeah, I think about this question twofold. First, from an internal perspective, we see organizations utilizing AI from the standpoint of matching resumes to job descriptions. So really that automated resume review. So when a job is opened internally or externally, your CRM is able to match profiles that are already in your system to these roles that are being opened. And then from an external standpoint, and I think this would probably go down in history as the ninth wonder of the world, the more we can focus on really simplifying the application process. That would certainly breed lots of opportunity for us to quickly go through profiles and skills that match our roles, but at the same time create a much more relaxed candidate experience in our process. So I'm taking this angle on AI where we can really lean into less cumbersome processes, both internally and externally.
Okay. I want to ask. I didn't forget you, Tunji. Okay, I have a question for you too, and it's a little more sensitive. But like as a senior people analytics manager, you've had like a front row seat to the way that technology has transformed HR. So can you share any specific examples of how tech has changed the way you and your team work at Google, for example?
Yeah, I would say, just kind of piggybacking off what Stacey mentioned, the ML aspect, right? Like in recruiting and in like kind of those functions, like even that being a capability, right? That's that, years ago, it was something that, we dreamt of, we weren't able to do. Now, like, we're in phases now where we actually can, like, see that that's actually part of a future strategy. And, of course, with anything ML, like, the important part is getting the precision right, and then getting the fairness and equity right as well, too, right? So, I'm really excited for the progress that has been made, like, year over year. I almost feel like every year, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, ML or AI is probably like the biggest thing that's like coming, and like we make progress
Yeah.
steadily. But really excited to kind of see how things are going, how we can use more ML like tools, like in terms of forecasting, right? People need to know information yesterday. And so,
Right.
ML models can really help teach us and tell us, like, you know, forecasting the market to so an uncertain macroeconomic environment in terms of how that should impact on hiring, thinking through like what is the best construction of a team given like certain characteristics or certain information that we do have, right? These are all areas that like ML could help, really lend a hand in, as well as really, from specifically from a people analytics data analysis perspective, just like analyzing large quantities of data, using specific tools to, like, before you would have to go in line by line to read qualitative data and understand, okay, this is the general themes, and this is the summaries. Now we have tools that like will provide these like summaries for you based on like the insights, and it's, at again, a pretty high precision. So it's just really an exciting time, and it's making work more efficient. Hopefully we don't get replaced by robots though.
But it is crazy how much it has changed in the past years. I mean, it's crazy. Like for me, what technology can do now, and seeing how like HR is finally like harnessing that power of data and technology is, it's, I don't know. Like I can't imagine what the future of the workplace is gonna be.
Yeah.
Speaking of data, like I'm glad that. Oh, did you have something you want to add? Something,
Yeah,
Fabio?
if I may just add something here,
Yes.
because I think both Stacey and Tunji mentioned something about augmenting the capacity that a recruiter may have into screening profiles. And some people watching us may be seeing us talking much about the perspective of the people professional, but maybe on the candidate's perspective, there are a lot of people that may be worried, for example, not only robots replacing us, but if we have, for example, a CV not being screened by a professional. So bringing up on the legal standpoint, in a lot of US states and companies, we are required to go through CVs with a person. And also something that may not be as clear for everyone is that the way that we want to use AI is to actually be able to see more and more profiles, because in the end of the day, we love a big and healthy pipeline. For example, as someone that have recruited a lot of software engineers, usually the problem is on the other side, to not have enough people. So as long as we can reach out and see more people, this is the kind of capability that we wanna automate, and not, for example, not screen people, or you be just behind a AI wall, as some people may say. So just to get this clear here.
Right, like more options, right?
Yeah.
Like more options, and finding the best fit, which isn't just good for the organization, it's good for the employee, the new employee as well, right? Yes, more data, better for me. So let's talk about data, because these days it's like there's the complete shift to digital. There seems to be no shortage of data to understand like employees and the workplace. And we're seeing this push for HR to be more data driven. There are now like people analytics teams, um, and now more than ever. So a question for all three of you, like how do you see data playing a role in shaping HR strategies and decision making in the coming years? And if you have any concrete examples of how data has led to like positive outcomes, would be happy to hear it. So maybe like now let's start with Stacey.
Sure. I feel like in many of my leadership roles, I have championed data for building out strategy, annual goaling for my teams, and all of that on the basis of predictive analytics. and our talent intelligence teams and our talent insights teams are somewhat new to the table, if you will. But I love that many organizations are building out their strategies based on the utilization of these teams. I can also say from data, we've been able to build out talent pipelining, future for accelerating hires based on planning. And I do apologize, someone's cutting the grass at my house right now, so if you hear that noise,
No problem.
Yeah, this is real time.
We're all used to these like sounds by now, I think.
Yeah, so but also data has helped a lot in the organizations that I've been aligned to in terms of succession planning. Where do we see the headcount? I will say, as especially big tech companies, as they are building out new strategies and data is not readily available in terms of, from a talent perspective, how to find this talent or where to find this talent. I think data will certainly play a big role into how talent is identified, and then of course how we engage that talent and keep them aligned to the work that they love. So final analysis is predictive analytics has been, a huge part of the work that I've done, the teams that I've built, as well. I think the one glitch in that, though, is the global pandemic, and not a lot of information or data that we could draw from those very unclear years of how we hired and who we hired, and building those candidate personas, if you will. So I know that I have some experts on this call in terms of data, so I'm also curious about the other panelists and their thoughts.
Yes, so am I. Maybe we can go with Tunji. What do you think? How is data going to shape the future of HR?
I hope in a positive way, else I may not have a job as a people analytics manager.
Exactly.
But seriously, I think data
is core of what you do, right?
Exactly. And there's just such a need for data for just insights. Companies are really seeking to make more data-driven decisions, and so they needing to have data readily accessible, available in a way that's like broken down, so they don't have to have like an analyst in the room to help explain. And so I think that's something we're going to continue to see. And the way data is just, it helps like really transform like your general people processes. Like I know specifically at Google, like through data analysis, we were able to see like what is the actual number of interviews that we need to have like a predictive like hiring process, right? And so like before, way back, you could have 10, 12, 13, 14, then we found like, oh, like you only need 4. Like you're just as predictive with 4 as you are with 14 or 15, right? That's all like a data informed decision. Market data, as we seek to like understand where do we expand, right? Where are the untapped markets? We have racial equity commitment goals that we're trying to hit and stuff. What markets lend ourselves to be able to achieve those goals and like have those the level of representation that we're seeking for? So not just like general HR data, but even like market data like plays such a huge role in like our overall strategy and location and expansion strategy. Data for like employee surveys, right? The employee engagement surveys that we send out just to get the pulse, right? What are employees feeling? What are they? What are the top concerns? What are they? What are they loving, right? So and having that like huge survey that's sent to employees at Google, right? It's just you're able to see just a general pulse, right? Then you can cut the data however you need to, and then really see like where should we be investing in, like as a team, as like a leadership, as an org, in the future. Maybe it's well-being, maybe it's more job clarity, maybe it's there's just so many different factors that it could be. And again, all of these are data-driven decisions. And lastly, I'll just mention like even something as like the diversity annual report that we put together, and pretty much we release, every year just a report of how we are kind of like tracking to some of our like representation goals, and like our hiring numbers by demographics, our attrition numbers, and then like other kind of like relevant factors. And even that, like, although, the question's asking about like positive outcomes, but I think that's led to accountability. Right now, if we have 1 year, we post a certain number of results now, and we're being very transparent about it, and the next year it's completely different, like we're going to have to explain, or we're going to have to be able to justify why we're seeing like a drop. And then we're, and also has the opportunity to celebrate when we're seeing like upticks and like we're actually hitting our targets. And so I think data is going to be here to stay, and just people are just going to want more of it and in a quicker fashion.
Right. I mean, it's like from gut feel to tangible data, right? That proves whether you're doing well or you aren't. I have like a follow up to that, but I want to hear from Fábio first. The power of data to transform HR.
Yeah, I'll try to wrap it up using some of the former questions that we have been shot at. One of them is talking about layoffs. I think there's going to be a rise of data literate professionals. So people with a technical background can use this as a competitive edge, and people that don't have this can try to maybe enhance and sharpen their skills to be different from the crowd. So the first thing is that, although Tunji mentioned there may be less analysts in the room, but I think someone at the room should be able to understand and leverage this data. So may not be like a team of 4, but instead of this, the people professional may have this kind of role and hat required in his. The other is talking about law. I think recently we have the California and New York Transparency Act that maybe are enforcing more and more companies to post their salary bands on their job boards. And this kind of public and private dynamic maybe be somewhat frictionate in some cases. I think this is very healthy for the long term to enable and increase transparency. And how can companies see this is actually as an opportunity, because those that adapt first, as we saw with the case of GDPR, they can be compliance ready, they can close more deals, and they can attract better candidates. Again, talking about GDPR, I think that's a very good use case, talking about more real examples here, because into recruitment or in ATS or HRIS software, being GDPR compliant is not only a business competitive edge right now for you to close more enterprise deals, but also in the internal narrative, I think that's very healthy, because it's sharing the power more between the companies and the employees. So people are having to opt in, for example, into what kind of data is being traced in their case. Let's talk about remote force, for example. Not every company is just watching people doing the work, and they have to be more trust-based. Candidates may just opt out from retaining their data for the long term. And again, it's a kind of friction into the B2B SaaS scene, because a lot of companies used to be able to handle this data freely, but in the long term, I think it clears the path for a more healthy discussion and the share of power into this narrative. So candidates may experience more control into the long term, and this kind of opportunities for them to embrace.
That leads me actually to a question that I had for Tunji, because you work a lot with data, and I'm sure when you talk to your friends about what you do, they're like, "Oop, like, are they watching me?" So my question is like, how do you ensure that the data or that how you use your data is like you use it ethically, responsibly within an organization, and what do you say and I don't know do to help employees feel comfortable with the fact that the company is using their data to better understand them?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things. Like one, in any kind of like whether it's a research project or like broad scale analytical project, there is a very strict kind of review process that you have to clearly spell out what data you're collecting, how long you're going to have the data, right? Because you can't just have data in your system forever. What you're going to do with the data, who's going to be privy to the data. And like this goes through a very rigorous review from not just like privacy, legal, senior stakeholders, just to make sure no one is collecting data just to collect data, right? And so we kind of go through that process of making sure that we're being as fine-tuned in what we're asking. We're only asking questions that we actually have a dedicated like intention of like acting on. And I think, the two ways that I would say we get people to, be comfortable with collecting data. One is just consent forms, right? Like there's always going to be some form of a consent form that, hey, you're saying that you're comfortable with us connecting this data to this data. It's going to be used for this purpose. And I think the real key though is finding some way to show a return on investment. Like if I gave you this data, if I'm sharing a survey insights with you, be very transparent about how the data, like what was actually done based on that. Because if you could say like, if folks complained about, how rigid the remote policy was for 2 years straight, and then nothing was done, right? They're less likely to want to take surveys, or less likely probably want to engage, want to give consent to use their data because they feel nothing's ever happens with this data. Right. It just sits and like I'm just using the emotional labor to express a concern and nothing's ever happening. So in some situations you'll be able to act and do something. Of course, there's going to be situations where you can't necessarily do something, but in situations where you can, or even if you can't, just be transparent in terms of, we did this in response to what we heard about this, and even just that small snippet will like really instill trust into like the kind of the population. And if you can't do something, based on the feedback, just be communicative and say like, we heard this, we're still looking for ways like, to address this, but like right now that's not in like current plans or current strategy, or, I think it goes a long ways for the employees to feel like, okay, I didn't do that for nothing, or like my data is not being used, right. It's being used for good purposes.
Or something as simple as, okay, I was heard and they're trying to do something about it, right?
Exactly.
So as not to get to survey fatigue. Okay. Time check. We have like 14 minutes left. So let's go into the chat. We have a question about how we can leverage data to improve companies' culture and employee engagement in particular. Fábio, would you have an answer to this? Like, how can someone use data to improve the culture of a company or employee engagement?
Yeah, maybe two ways quickly thinking from the top of my mind here. One is using actually HR tech solutions that can leverage this data. So there are solutions right now that can do polls or 360 feedback sessions, and you can just later exploit this into a better way, as Erudite, for example. And the other is to, I think Tunji pretty much said it all, is use this as an opportunity to create a better bonds between management, people culture, and the employees. So if you have to have this talk between those two parties on how to use data. Why don't you leverage this to have as an H1 one-on-one session or a performance review, and you talk through what you have been doing, or you can sell out the kind of future projects, so you can have people buy in and be on board with what you're doing. It's so much easier in the end of the day and have so lower friction if everyone is on board into the same path, right? In some companies, you may be like going multiple directions, and in the end of the day, the best way is to just sit down, talk, and trust.
Right. Like what we see in Erudite is that like with the data, you see how different each team can be, how different each organization can be, and like the next step forward isn't necessarily like a best practice that one size fits all solution, but sometimes you have to look at, okay, what's happening in this particular team to come up with a solution and to improve the culture and engagement. So yes. Okay. Sorry, I had to get that out. I want to go back to our challenges and goals for 2023, like before we wrap up. So it's called Unlocking HR's Potential in 2023, right? Our webinar. So what would be like the top lessons or even like the top tools that you think HR professionals and people leaders should keep in mind to truly unlock their potential and the potential of their human capital in 2023? So let's start with Tunji.
Yeah, so I think kind of one area that we talked about a little bit is again that remote work optimization. We've been thinking a lot more about like is it let people work remote or don't let people work remote? That's kind of been like the main discussion point. But for those who leaning into more remote work, how could we optimize that experience, right? Because I haven't seen like companies really go out of their way to see, all we've heard is the concerns may not be like this, may not be as much visibility, connection, you may lose some culture, people may not, has company culture. But, how could we actually maximize that experience and improve that experience and change those biases, right? So really doubling down on that and using that as a competitive advantage for you as a company to say that, hey, we have this remote process, but guess what? It still feels like you're in office. Now, I'm not sure if that's possible, but it's like something that I think it's a worthwhile endeavor for HR in 2023.
Great. Like, what about Stacey?
Yeah, as Tunji was talking, I was kind of jotting down just like my quick thoughts here. And I'm going to bring us back to one thing I'd love to see our organizations do, and that's really build upon redeployment of skills and figuring out how do we better capitalize on the skill sets that are within our organization and kind of layer into that those passions and interest of the individual.
That's beautiful. Like it's like a dream for the future of work,
Yeah,
right?
talking future of work, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love the answer. Okay, Fabio, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so my lessons and even trying to give a segue here on tools. I think Janine, of course, said about Erudite and your solution is great. I was trying to think here more on some of the recruitment solutions that I have seen recently. And first of all, the biggest lesson that I have seen, not only in this past year, but the past years, or maybe the lesson that I had most in my career is that you should watch out for trends, but you shouldn't let them be the ones setting where you go. Because some of the times everyone may be seeing this as the big new shiny object, and later it's not quite the scenario, and you just left hanging. And so one of the things is to understand the norms, but don't just conform by them to the default. And maybe if you are just following your passions and the thing that you're actually above average into doing, you may find yourself doing like the next trend beforehand. And on tools, I think with one of these topics being going back to the remote setting and some of the companies not still kind of figuring out exactly the terms to use, if either remote or distributed. One of the solutions that I have been quite fond of is vetted and curated job boards that like 4 or 5 years in the past, there wasn't such a need. So people were tending to go like into bigger funnels like LinkedIn for sourcing. And right now, one of the trends is that most sourcers actually go outside of it. So they don't have a very good ROI into just the main funnels, and they should be building their own pipeline and especially augmenting with, let's say, in tech, using GitHub, using Stack Overflow, or small communities. So one of the things that I actually loved to see recently are curated job boards, especially done for and by people into their sectors. So let's say if you are recruiting software engineers, there are, let's say, and give a shout out, for example, to the Pragmatic Engineer job board. That is a guy that used to work at Uber and others big techs, and he did like his own newsletter. And most companies, to be there, they have to comply. So let's say, for example, to post their salaries, and they have to have a good culture. They have to for example, not have recently laid off and be hiring right now. So this kind of, again, this power shift dynamic into smaller niche communities and people that are walking the talk, it's something that I think it's gonna maybe blow up and be the biggest advantage. So I would encourage everyone, if you have been laid off recently, for example, to go out and look forward into job boards that say for companies that didn't lay off recently, so you don't have to spend all that time into Excel sheets, for example.
Awesome. These are such idealistic and positive like answers. I love it. We have a little
We
bit
try to
more time.
dream as
So
much as possible.
yeah, exactly. But I want to squeeze in one last question. Like there are articles now saying like the future CEOs are going to be coming from HR. They're going to be the chief people officers, the CHROs. What is your take on this? Do you think the future of like the leaders of the company are going to be coming from HR? Let's start with Stacey.
As it should be. They
Yeah.
should come from HR. Because of, when I think about how companies are built, how they grow, how they innovate, that all starts with what? The human capital. And knowing that we're the pioneers of ideas and how we forge these ideas forward and build from them. I certainly think that our C suite should be filled with individuals that, if for nothing else, maybe they may not be, career professionals in HR, but they've had a stint or an opportunity to work um, in the human capital space so that they understand things like emotional intelligence. They understand how to care for the individuals that really put their heart and soul into building these organizations. So, yeah, you get a big thumbs up from me all day long on that idea.
Great. What about you, Fabio?
Sorry, I was on mute. Maybe sad to ruin the party here. So, although I am idealistic and I would love to have every founding team have someone just as a chief people officer, for example, I actually don't believe this will happen so soon, and that's even the path that we are going. Because first of all, I don't see so much HR leaders right now talking about founding companies, and this should be the norm, right? So there's everyone into executive roles right now. Some years in the past they had to drop it all and actually found the company. But the good news is, comparing first-time founders and second-time founders, I see a difference into how much they weighting people into their decisions and data. So people that have like the battle scars and they see how hard it is to recruit or to give it a good employee value proposition, how people analytics can leverage their work and actually save up time, money, and efforts for the long run. They can then into the second run, if they are starting another company, they can think about people early. But still, I think like trying to be as real as possible. People leaders into the C-suite is probably something close to the 20 employees margin, but I would love to be into the first 3, for example. But usually people are having a CEO, CFO, and let's say a chief product officer. So maybe into HR tax, the product officer is also the people officer, and I would love to see more of this.
Right. Okay. So we have 2 different answers. Tunji, what?
I'm gonna kind of
What do
play
you think?
defense on the middle. Like I would love to see
Come
more
on,
HR.
Tunji. Come on.
I would love to see more HR like folks in this like CEO positions, right? And I think part of this conversation is just because really everything we've been through the last like 2 to 3 years, right? Where there's that human element, whether it was starting with the pandemic and then now it's like the Great Resignation and like quiet quitting and all of these different factors. Whereas like people are looking for leaders to make humanistic decisions based on like what's going on. And so, unfortunately, like I also feel that, everything kind of works in cycles. And so right now it's like the hot topic thing or like, the human side of things. And I think that may get outweighed in the future, like just by, again, just regular business and how things have historically operated. But what I will say is that I think the future, in the past, it was seemingly quote unquote okay for a CEO to not have that human element and like still thrive. I think in the future work, like every CEO is going to have that component like as part of their core capabilities and core responsibilities, because we've been through too much as a workforce. So like it's non-negotiable, I think, at this point.
Wow, that's a great end, right? What do you think, Stacey and Fabio? It's a a good way to end our
Yeah, I
webinar.
think
Hey,
that's
you
a
played
good
that.
balance.
You straddled that fence really well, sir.
Yeah, exactly. I like it. Okay, I just like the hour flew by really quick. So thank you guys so much for all your awesome insights and for sharing your experiences and expertise with us today. Your contributions have made this webinar super valuable for everyone. So just want to ask if you guys have any final words for the audience before we say goodbye. Tunji.
Yeah, so I'll just end by saying one, thank you for allowing me to be on this panel. But in terms of everything we've seen, with layoffs and just reprioritization, I encourage HR and companies just to use this opportunity to triple down on your DEI functions. These are some areas that get cut in these type of scenarios. And in 2020, there was a lot of strong proclamations made about companies' commitments to diversity and to equity and to inclusion. And so this is not the time to kind of get out of that race, because I think it's going to be a lot harder to get back in if you kind of pull back, now. So I just encourage folks to really zero in there.
Thank you so much, Tunji. It was great having you. Next, Stacey.
Yeah, since we're right at time, I will just say thanks for having me. I had a whole lot of fun doing this, and I look forward to the next one. Tunji, I'm going to use some of your verbiage that, certainly our DEI in this time has suffered. And I really think it's a great time to lean in and to rebuild and recommit in these areas.
It was lovely having you, Stacey. Thank you so much. And lastly, we have Fábio.
All right. Thank you all for this opportunity. I just love the interaction and the questions being provided here by the chat. Hope everyone had a good time. If I had my final words here, or maybe word of advice, since we have dreamed so much, I'll try to keep it more real, is use all these changes that the market has been having as an opportunity for you. So if you have been recently laid off, first of all, keep it hanging, keep it trying. But there are some opportunities that some people may not be seeing. And we talk about the rise of AI. Kind of the barrier to start companies and start products is even lower right now. There is a trend called micro SaaS right now that people are doing just like one product to fix one solution. And if you can get this ready with no code and have this being profitable, you can scale, you can do it all. Or even if it doesn't work out, you can use this kind of setback time between jobs that you have been experimenting as a great use case for your entrepreneurial site. And inside of companies, I think that's also going to be a really good advantage right now, is people that have been this entrepreneurial spirits. They have been workouts into their own projects. They understand how to leverage product and data, and it's definitely a long-term asset for you. So try to grasp these opportunities. And if there's anything that I also can do, guys, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to extend this conversation moving forward.
Thank you so much, Fábio, for your inspirational words. And thank you to all three of you, Tunji, Stacey, and Fábio. You guys rock. A big thank you as well to our production team, who is one awesome lady, Anna, behind the scenes, putting this all together. And thank you to all our participants for joining us. We hope you come away with some new ideas and strategies for unlocking HR's potential in the coming year. So don't forget to follow Erudite if you want the future articles that we're going to be making from this session. We touched on a lot of interesting topics that we hope to go much deeper into in future Shockwave Talks as well. So that is a wrap for Erudite Shockwave Talks, Unlocking HR's Potential in 2023. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Janine, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.